Welcome to the 6th TIRANA Connectivity Forum and this conversation devoted to rethinking connectivity between the EU and the Southeastern European six, with a special focus on Albania. My name is Stephen Blockmans and I'm the acting director of CEPS, the Brussels-based think tank. This year's forum carries the subtitle Connectivity in Pandemic Times, Threats and Opportunities. It's almost a platitude to say that the COVID-19 crisis has demonstrated that everything is connected. But it's certainly true that infrastructure, political, socioeconomic, and ecological systems are changing and impacting each other in the process. Disasters like earthquakes and health scares constitute a litmus test of what matters and what doesn't, what's corrupt and what's healthy, what's strong and what's weak. As the abstract of the conference states, these disasters lift the veil of interpretation about what's around us. The Balkan countries have weathered relatively well the first COVID wave and are now dealing with or preparing for the second wave. Albania and North Macedonia have continued on the path of institutional reforms and progress towards EU membership. Their first intergovernmental conference is expected to be organized during the German presidency. Meanwhile, the EU Commission is wrapping up the Economic and Investment Plan, where connectivity in transport, energy, digital, and in value chains is the key word. Our task now is to understand which disconnection consequences the COVID-19 crisis has produced, which new opportunities for enhanced connectivity may be seized, and to identify new development scenarios for the Southeastern European six, and what is required from us all to cope and to grow. How should the socioeconomic fabric of Southeastern Europe develop to face and also profit from the COVID-19 crisis? And which role can Italy play in this regard? The forum's international audience knows Mr. Prodi best as the 10th President of the European Commission, and because he served twice at either end of his tenure in Brussels as Prime Minister of Italy. In academic circles, Il Professore is lauded for his work on industrial organization and policy, with a specific knack for the development of SMEs. President Prodi, welcome to this conversation.
Welcome to you.
We know that you carry a warm heart for Albania and the region, even if your roots lie in Reggio Emilia. But allow me to start therefore with a personal question. What is your personal affinity with the Southern Adriatic?
Oh, look, this is where I was going when I was a child, a little north than Albania. But my passion, honestly, came later, when I understood how the Adriatic countries must be linked and how they were linked in the past. And now we are completely forgetting, meeting in oblivion our history. And the Adriatic was a lake, always a lake, not a sea.
I see. But in your recent opinion piece, which was published in Il Messaggero on the 15th of August, you write, and I translate, that our South will never be able to renew itself if it continues to have around it a desert full of troubles. Now, the latter phrase, a desert full of troubles, reminded me of another concept which you launched when talking about the EU's neighborhood policy, a ring of friends. Could you please share with the participants of the forum your reflections on the perceived geopolitical need to reinforce ties across the lake of the Adriatic?
It's clearly, when I was president of the Commission, many were telling me that our attention was only for the north and northeast countries, and we forgot the Adriatic, And my answer was very clear, we must make things step by step. But then we stopped our policy of enlargement is a bad word, but of comprehensive policy And I do think, and it was my opinion, that all the Balkan countries, not only former Yugoslavian countries, but all the Balkan countries must be member of European Union and then stop. To do it soon, to do it quickly, because we need to have a clear idea of our future. But, you know, the Croatian entrance was so slow, then problems for other countries. Then I was really disappointed when, let's say, the negotiation with Albania, they were in some way stopped by French veto. And I do think that we have to take the consequence not only of history, but geography and of the political needs. Concerning Albania and Italy is also a special case. You have 700,000 Albanians living in Italy. And so 25% of Albanians live in my country. And so we are brother countries. And so we have to institutionalize this link. In the beginning of Albanian migration, we had, as always happened in this case, we had tensions, accusations, you know. Now, the Albanian community is part of Italy. And the Italian investments in Albania, they are part of our economy. And so when I see that negotiations don't make progress, I am furious.
Can I ask you about the geopolitical forces at work that the European Union and the Western Balkans bring together?
First of all, when you deal about politics, you must be clear about long-term goals. And clearly, you cannot have only one or two former Yugoslavian republics inside the European Union, or an exceptions like Albania out of the Union. You know, you have Greece, you have Bulgaria, Romania, Croatia, and Slovenia, and you know, and then when you think you cannot go spot by spot like that, and if you think the economic dimension of the states, this maybe 100% of European GDP, a little more than 100%, you know, is not a problem from the economic side. Clearly, when you have such a big number of countries, you have to reform your institutions, you have to adapt to the new reality, but this was clear since the beginning of the process of enlargement backed by all the European countries. So now there is absolutely no reason to stop this process because you can, of course, you must be severe, as we have been in the first enlargement, start the process, put the condition on the democratic aspects, on the working of the parliament, on the legal, juridical aspects, you know. But clearly you have to start this process. If you don't start it, you can create vacuums, you can create misunderstandings, you can prepare some negative, let's say, reaction for the future. And I repeat, to start negotiations, there are no economic obstacles, no deep obstacles on the effort to, let's say, have a democratic system. And so you have to start to, let's say, to analyze the concrete aspects and reform to do to finalize the process in a very short period of time.
I think this might be a good moment to bring in Ilva from the studio of Euronews to focus a little bit more on Italy and Albania.
Sure, thank you, Stephen. President Prodi.
Look, between Italy and Albania, we have no major problems. I repeat, there is such a, let's say, penetration of the two economic systems that are so deeply from the, let's say, ethnic point of view. And so I think that even from the Italian and the Albanian side, we are not making the necessary efforts to link forever and all the aspects of our communities. But we have no really, if you tell me which are the obstacles, I say there are no obstacles. This is what I cannot stand, there are no obstacles. Our destiny is so close and we are not bringing to the end this process, Of course, the world has changed. Italian language was spoken by a great part of Albania, now because of Italian television, now not anymore because the television networks are much more complex and so there is not anymore an Italian peculiarity. We have, but the relation between the two countries are, in spite of all that, improving from the cultural point of view, from the political point of view, from the economic point of view. And so I look forward that we are also in the same political community.
President Prodi, it's Ilva Tare from Euronews Albania in Tirana. Your image in Albania in '97 during the mission Alba and your visit in Vlora is still very vivid to the Albanian people. Why do you think during the years the cooperation between Albania and Italy somehow faded, although the numbers in economic exchanges and human exchanges have been impressive? What is your assessment on the current collaboration between two countries?
I repeat, from the economic point of view, there are no problems. But we have the daily political links that are necessary in this case when there is such an affinity of the communities. You mentioned the mission in Albania in 1997. It was natural, because clearly we were looking at each other after so many decades of separation. And it was my bet that this process could make progress even rapidly, even from the political point of view. Now it's time to do it. It's very simple. And clearly this will speed up even more the economic connections, the trade connections, and also for Italy is also a necessary step for the south development of Italy. I think that our Mezzogiorno, how it's called, cannot progress without strong relation with Albania, Greece, and South Mediterranean countries, because this is our neighbor. And this is an eternal European problem. This is why I proposed the so-called, when I was president of the Commission, the so-called Ring of Friends, that around Europe, from Belarus till Turkey, Syria, till Morocco, Israel, we could have strong relations country by country. They will not be member of the Union, but to have around us a ring of friends. This is why I am so anxious to finish, to end the problem of the border of Europe and to start a policy for the neighbor around us.
President Prodi, when you mentioned the development of south of Italy and the interest that the Mezzogiorno has Albania as well developed, do you envision common projects in terms of infrastructure, connectivity, education, climate change? How this development, common development, can be realistic, can be made?
Well, look, first, as you know, is energy cooperation. That is so clear and so simple. And what is lacking are the active policy that you mentioned. This is what I mean. We must have together an environmental policy because it's a lake, as I told before. We must have together cultural projects and what I think in the school system, I do insist, the university, we have some exchange, but we have to multiply it because there is not the natural exchange of students on both sides as we have, as we need. These are the three priorities, energy, environment, and people, starting from students and scholars. But of course, in the meanwhile, you have to increase our trade and our cross investment. But this is going well. This is going well.
President Prodi, I would like to bring your attention in what you mentioned in the article in the Messaggero, talking about not to let the shores of Adriatic detach and have other partners like Russia, China or Turkey become crucial actors and players in the region. What can Italy do in order to maintain its position, its strong position as an advocate for the EU membership and EU negotiations with Albania?
Well, the first condition is that Albania become member of the Union, you know, because we are sharing more of our future together, you know. But also we need to get these goals. Is not sufficient to have a new Italian policy. It's necessary to have a European policy, because now China, that is increasing trade investment interest in Europe, and this is maybe a double advantage for both the partners, but with a policy that is 17+1, that is dividing Europe. And I don't think that is neither Chinese nor European interest in the long term to do it. So I do think that first of all, vis-à-vis China and vis-à-vis Turkey, we must have a common European policy. Clearly, I do understand the Turkish interest in Albania, and I repeat, I don't think that this is bad for Albania. I think it's good, but you cannot compare the links that Albania has now with Europe with the links that Albania now has with Turkey in terms of quantitative trade, investments, and let's say long-range interests. And so I don't think that we have to link more with Albania in order to push out China or Turkey. This is stupid because we live in a world in which we need relation with everybody. But I don't understand how Europe and Italy cannot have the priority, and because this is the answer to real interests of both of us.
Steven?
On China, President Prodi, you are a long-time visitor of China. You have been following the developments of the Belt and Road Initiative very closely. Of course, we have seen in the wake of the first wave of the COVID-19 crisis, the blame which was heaped on China for its mask diplomacy. We've also seen statements, for example, by European Commissioner Breton and others, that parts of the medical industry, as indeed other industries, should be reshored to Europe to strengthen Europe's strategic autonomy. Now, do you think that such reshoring will help Albania and the other Southeastern European countries, and if so, how?
Look, I do think that because of COVID-19, world competition will change. The global competition will not end up, also because for a reason that 40% of Chinese exports are originated by multinational companies, mainly Americans. So look, in the United States, they are very ferocious concerning technology and so on. But trade, look, they put obstacles, but they don't want to break up all. But competition will change because of pandemic, because we understood that in each of the great area, you must have a minimum of production of the essential goods. So reshoring will be done in Europe, reshoring will be done in the United States, and will be done also in China, because each of the great areas will have some sort of minimum security in terms of production. So we are interested as Europeans in substantial reshoring from China. European companies will stay in China for serving the internal Chinese market, but will reshore a part of the export from previous export from China to Europe. And clearly, we are all interested. Albania, because has strong relation with China, and Italy too. I do think that the reshoring will be done with a different strategy. Reshoring more simple industries to the European low-cost European countries, and more sophisticated industry to the more, let's say, advanced industry. So I do think that Albania and Italy are interested to the reshoring, but not competing each other for the moment at least.
President Prodi, in this regard, last year's the ports of La Regione Puglia, the region of Puglia, they were left out of the memorandums that Italy signed with China. Do you think there is an opportunity between Puglia and Albania, let's say Bari and the port of Durrës, to lobby together, to have a joint approach towards China? Let's say to become an itinerary from Bari to Durrës, to be an important hub, a crucial station in the maritime Silk Road that ends in Trieste?
Look, this is possible, but you must have a clear previous agreement between Puglia and Albania, or between Trieste and Albania. The problem is that if we present ourselves divided and not in strong agreement, we shall have, let's say, contrasting interests. And China, because they are intelligent traits, will apply the divide and rule policy as everybody does in this condition. So to deal with China together, you must start being together.
The first part of the question relates to the Commission's forthcoming growth and investment package. And I was wondering to what extent the internal policy ought to be matched with an external dimension towards Southeast Europe.
Look, clearly the package was and is for members of the Union, you know. And this is why I do insist to define all the borders of Europe in order to have a long-term policy that will also involve the Western Balkans and Albania. Now, the package is for European members. Clearly, if, as I think, Europe will grow more or decrease less with this decision, there will be a net advantage also for our neighbor non-member countries, but not a direct advantage.
My question that I would like to return to relates to your comments about the enlargement strategy itself. We've noted that the European Union and its institutions and member states have their own difficulties in reforming and securing rule of law. As a prerequisite for membership, it becomes a bit difficult, of course, to ask almost the same from candidate countries. We have our own house to clean up in that respect, don't you think?
Oh, yes, but it depends upon what you have in mind. Look, I have never conceived the enlargement be done only when there is an identity in the institutional and political situation. You need a minimum, and this minimum, I think, is close. And then you have to close the biggest gap during the negotiation and enter, even if the situation is not perfect, because step by step, the confidence, working together will improve the situation. And this is what is happening. Because now, of course, you can object me, but look how deep are the problems with Poland and Hungary. Okay, there are big problems. But in the end of the story, I think that there will be a convergence. Even in this case, we must be very severe, but I do think that being out is a deeper obstacle, is a bigger obstacle to the reforms. And the long-term political goals are long-term political goals. And I think that are necessary for our survival. And as you know, I asked so many times to the European Parliament to have a debate on the borders of Europe and to define Europe borders forever and so on. So it was never possible because of the difficult political situation. But in spite of that, I do think that we have all the interest to close the process, knowing that still there will be many difficult adaptation to do. But this is better than the tension that you have now in Ukraine or in gray area close to us. Really, I do think that in the long term, the problem that we have now, even they are very ethical and deep problem, they can now be fixed much better inside the Union than outside. Clearly, if you want to have the Union only when there is a perfect identity in institutions and in policies, you will start a never-ending process with all the consequences of all the never-ending processes.
President Prodi, as you very well know, reforms are large and deep, and they take a long time. While enlargement is, as a process, has, clear deliverables. Albania is a front runner when it comes to the reforms, but is lacking behind in the enlargement process. What's your advice? How to deal with this problem, with this issue?
Well, I have been so clear. When I started to analyze Albania, it was a disaster. Nobody was working, and the tension I had the first time I came to the country. And so I do think that the progress has been absolutely remarkable. And we have to take the consequence of that. I know that now you have problem in the judiciary statement and problem in the transparency of the economy. But I do think that you now are in the right direction, and to be member of the Union will be the definitive achievement of these goals.
President Prodi, should Italy be a stronger champion for enlargement of Albania and North Macedonia inside the European Union?
This is my conviction. This is what I think. And also I wrote that I didn't like that Italy did not openly react and strongly react to the French decision to delay the problem. Because Italy must be the let's say, the big supporter of this process. Clearly, all Italy wants to have Albania and Macedonia in and start negotiation. But we have not been strong enough to, let's say, to support this inside the European institutions. Now, look, maybe I'm too optimist. Now I think that even the French attitude is changing.
Ilva?
Yes, may I ask something else? President Prodi, as you mentioned, 700,000 Albanians live in Italy and 200,000 have Italian citizenship already. I read some economic data that were referring to the first 6 months of 2020, and even under pandemic times, Italy remains the first commercial partner of Albania, with imports in the first 6 months of almost 534 million euros and exports from Albania to Italy around 461 million. How can we make these human and economic exchanges, relations, more important into political relations and cooperations as well? And in this regard, what's your advice on the reforms that Albania has to undertake and how Albania and Italy can work closer together?
Look, first of all, trade is fantastic, but it's not enough. I think that due the proximity could be, let's say, at least 20-30% more. But this is, clearly, we'll go on. What I think now, I think that we need immediately 2 meetings, one in Rome and one in Tirana, between the two prime ministers, with first of all, the political expression, the political will to help each other, to have a common process for the Albanian membership to the Union, and to have some sort of symbolic, let's say, common cultural investments, let's say a common university with the same number of students and professors of the two countries. Let's say this, I think that we need now a jump that will link the two people in an institutional way. The transitional moment is already over. Now we have really to increase a new phase of cooperation.
You said earlier, President Prodi, that Italy should have been openly criticizing France by not supporting the starting of negotiations. What do you mean? That underlined Italy has been an advocate that was in favor and has done some diplomatic work? Can it be this time even more vocal?
Yes. I say yes. I should have been more vocal. Simply that.
Stephen?
President Prodi.
And also, giving the example, when I say a strong link between the two leaders with some common project will help the European attitude.
President Prodi, on this European attitude, we have seen very strong positions by Mark Rutte from the Netherlands, but also Macron, of course. How can they be convinced when Albania and Italy are joined to the hip?
Look, Holland was also strongly against the new European policy, let's say, of solidarity, but look, if you don't start a process, you cannot say that will be successful or not. And you think that if we start a strong cooperation, France will say, look, why not? We do something similar. Is also our interest. If they say that the link is strong and definitive and is positive, the opposition will be less effective.
President Prodi, from the times you were heading the European Commission, and nowadays, what do you think of the European Union with Eurosceptics increasing day by day?
Okay, this is the reason why the enlargement has been slowing. But, Madam, I do think that the populistic anti-European forces are now decreasing. The last European election, they were a surprise. When you ask to the European people, Europe or not Europe, yes or no, they will say yes. It was so clear. But even in the last, not so important Italian election, regional election, 3 days ago, the anti-European parties have lost a lot of votes, because I repeat, when you arrive to yes or no, everybody understand where is our destiny.
Across the Adriatic, Albania, but also Montenegro, could be the gateway to unlock some of the landlocked countries there. I'm thinking Kosovo, Macedonia, North Macedonia, and Serbia. Where do you think the first investments in increased connectivity should be made? Is that in hard infrastructure, transport? Is it in energy? Is it in digital? What would be producing the quickest added value?
Look, it depends case by case. For example, when you have a country locked, clearly the first reaction will be roads, highways, or this, but in our case, you need ports, exchange of tourism, thinking how, for example, Montenegro is moving to the seaside. You have clearly to develop policies adapted and fitted case by case. But infrastructure are a first priority. Infrastructure in energy are the easiest to do. You have to create complementarity step by step.
President Romano Prodi, and to bring back to what you stated earlier, TIRANA Forum Connectivity 2020 can we say that it endorses and asks for both government of Albania and Italy to meet and start working together closer? As a strong recommendation of this forum?
Yes, because, I repeat, when you have so incredible links, where is the situation in which peaceful and without tension, you have 20%, more than 20% of your population in another country? But tell me another example. there are no refugees, there are immigrants, they are now being businessmen, workers, were inserted in the Italian community, going up and down from Albania, making holidays in Albania, working in Italy. When you have this situation, which is, tell me another case in which you have this potential. I don't see any one of them. You know, when you have this movement of people, because there are wars, refugees, and so on and so on, here, we have really, and we don't take the value of these increasing relations. You know, you don't take the consequence. This is my simple, very simple, common sense position.
President Prodi, are you suggesting that Europe is missing the train, whereas China is investing heavily in road infrastructure, tunnels, railways, and where the US, with the Serbian Kosovo deal of recently, is also up the game again?
No, look, I repeat, I know China well. I do think that we have to work with China, keeping our Western alliance, of course, you know, but I also think, and I advised this, you know, that the Silk Road, that I do think is a very intelligent proposal and positive, has not been put in action as we thought. There is no active cooperation between China and Europe. There is no common decision of common investments, you know. And so this was the spirit of Silk Road. And so, and when you mentioned the Chinese investment in East European countries, I have no objection. But when China divides Europe between 17 plus 1 in an institutional way, divide this by the other European countries, I don't like it, you know, because I do think that China can deal country by country, but it's not Chinese long-term interest and not European long-term interest to make institutional divisions, institutional splits. This is what I think, you know. But we could have also interest to make common Chinese and European investments common in Africa because China has problems in some African countries. European countries have problems in some African countries, and so we could also cooperate in this situation, but with clear rules and transparency. And I do think that it's possible. It's possible.
Do you see a similar possibility for closer cooperation between Europe and the US, which under Trump and with the
there are already more cooperation between Europe and US. I do think that Europe and US, thanks God, we have no problems, you know. Well, we have no problems. Trump policy has raised problems. Traditionally, we have no problems. We belong to the same military alliance. Clearly, in the last 4 years, I don't think that the relation have been so smooth and friendly like in the past, but I do think that in the long term, everybody understands that our traditional friendship and closeness will go on.
We are seeing, especially under Trump's administration and the agreement between Kosovo and Serbia in the White House, a return of US attention in the Balkans through investments in connectivity, infrastructure, energy, etc. Does this mean that Americans makes it better than Europeans?
No, look, we are not, I don't know, honestly, better or worse. I do think that we have common interests. I am happy if the Americans have, let's say, give more attention to the Balkans, because they have been too absent from this area. But don't ask me if who is behaving better, because I really don't know. I simply don't understand the Americans' competitors with the European in the Balkans.
And so you plead for a stronger relationship transatlantically to deal with the Balkans, to provide them with this prospect of integration to the European Union?
Yeah, well, look, in the old time, the Americans, they backed the expansion of the European Union to the Balkans. When traditionally the American policy was in favor of Europe, even if we were competing. I do remember when we created the euro, the American could have, let's say, blocked this easily with their financial strength. They never did it because traditionally we had long-term common interest. Only in the last years, the American president has considered Europe only as a competitor or sometimes as an enemy, at least only a competitor and not as a friend, a competitor. But I do think that this is only a temporary attitude, because the links between the US and Europe are so strong that even Trump will be unable to break up it.
President
Okay.
Prodi, it was a pleasure talking to you. Your assessment on the enlargement process and the way it is managed with a stronger role for Italy will be of great interest for the forum participants. So on their and the organizers' behalf, Ilva and I would like to warmly thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
President Prodi, grazie, faleminderit.
Grazie.